Let's make a creamy and delicious butternut squash risotto. Now we've got here one butternut squash, which we're gonna cut first in half. We'll get all the seeds out, which you can keep them, dry them up, and you can use them roasted as a snack, or you can use them as a garnish for the soup. Now, instead of cooking this just in a pan, which you can do, and I do it sometimes, we're gonna try to get a lot more flavor out of this by roasting it into the oven. So it goes into a tray, and we're gonna add the seasoning. Now, this is a thick squash, so you wanna add quite a bit of seasoning right from the beginning. Salt, about a tablespoon. Freshly ground black pepper, a good teaspoon. We've got thyme and rosemary, a few sprigs of each. Now I like my squash to be spicy, so in this situation we're adding some harissa seasoning. Now I love the harissa seasoning because it has all sorts of ingredients in it, from chilies, cumin, coriander, smoked paprika, garlic, and probably many others. Now it's time to follow with some olive oil. And I'm not just roasting the butternut squash, I'm also roasting the onion and the garlic, which I've got here a large white onion. I'm just gonna cut it in half, trim the ends. I've got one large bulb of garlic, cut it in half. And all these are going into aluminium foil. And the reason why I'm adding them into the aluminium foil is because otherwise they will get too dry. And we want to make sure that they stay together enclosed into this pocket, keeping all the flavors inside. Salt, pepper, olive oil, about 2 tablespoons. And now we're just gonna enclose this. And now our tray is ready, and we're gonna get this into the oven at 180 degrees Celsius for about 45 minutes, or until the squash is cooked all the way through. When you test it with a fork, it goes easily through it, then it's when you know it's ready. Now, while our butternut squash is cooking into the oven, we have plenty of time to get the risotto base ready. And it's a video that I've done a few weeks back, and we're just gonna get to it and see how to make the perfect risotto base for this recipe. And I've got here one small white onion, and in an ideal situation you might want to use shallots instead of white onion, just because it has a lighter onion flavor. But in most situations you're not going to find shallots in your regular shop around the corner, so with onion you'll be just fine. Now, 2 cloves of garlic, and again is a situation when some recipes will not even talk about adding garlic. I feel like it works. It brings something to this recipe that makes it taste better. But if you don't like it, or if you want to skip it, that's totally fine. Now set the pan on medium heat, and when the pan is hot enough, we're going in with about 2-3 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. In goes the finely chopped onion and garlic. And now we're going to cook these for about 3 to 5 minutes, or until the onion starts becoming sweeter during the cooking process. Now we have here 300 grams of Arborio rice. This is the perfect rice for risotto. It works really well, it's got high starch content, and it gets nice and creamy. So when you're buying your rice, make sure that it's suitable for this dish, because there is a specific variety that you want to choose. Is either this or there are a few more, but make sure that it's suitable for risotto. This doesn't require washing, by the way. It's not like when you're making, let's say, something with basmati rice. This goes in as it is because you don't want to wash off that starch that surrounds the grain. Now at this stage of cooking, I also like to add a sprig of fresh thyme. And we're going to continue cooking this for about 5 minutes, or until the grain of the rice starts becoming translucent at the edges. So you almost start seeing through it. Then is when you know that you can move to the next stage of cooking. Now, a quick important tip here: when you're mixing into your risotto, make sure that you're using a wooden spoon, a silicone spoon, something that's slightly softer texture, so you don't break the grain whilst mixing. Now, I'm happy with what I see here, and I'm gonna add now the white wine. I've got here about 100 milliliters of dry white wine. And we're gonna cook this for a further 2-3 minutes or until the wine evaporates, and all we end up with is the flavor from the wine. So most of the alcohol will evaporate during this process. I have here 1 liter of vegetable stock, but you can also go with chicken. I actually quite like chicken, but in this situation, I made some quick vegetable stock. Doesn't take long. All you need is just a few vegetables, simmer them for an hour, and there is your vegetable stock right there. So you can go with chicken stock if you wish, but the key here is make sure that it's hot when you're adding it in, because if it's not hot, it will stop the cooking process of the rice, and you need to wait again to get to a simmering temperature and so on. Because we're gonna add these gradually. We're gonna begin with 2-3 small ladles. Now, something that I'm quite keen on doing right after starting adding the stock is to add the salt in. So I'm going in with about ½ teaspoon to begin with, and we're gonna test at the end. But it's important, in my opinion, to add the salt at the beginning, because during the cooking process, they will get absorbed by the grain, and it will have so much better flavor than just adding the entire seasoning at the end. Now, before you get to the 16 minutes cooking time, make sure that you taste your risotto and see it might be ready earlier. So something to bear in mind, because you don't want to overcook it. And a term that you probably hear a lot is al dente. That's how risotto should be cooked. That's how pasta should be cooked. And this is a term that Italians use a lot. And what does that mean is to bite. So when you bite into it, it's cooked, but it still has a bit of texture in there. So it's not cooked like all the way through. Now I'm happy with what I see here. So we can remove the thyme. It's done its job. And in order to make this creamier, but also giving it more flavor, this is what we're doing. I've got here 50 grams of butter, cold butter, chopped into cubes. And I'm gonna add 2 at a time, mix, make sure that they get absorbed by the sauce. And then we're going with 2 more, and so on. And now is also the time when we're going in with about 50 grams of grated Parmesan cheese. Make sure everything gets well incorporated and your risotto gets nice and creamy. And after about 45 minutes of cooking, our butternut squash is ready. And now what we want to do is scoop all that inside of the squash out, removing the skin, because that's quite tough and we don't want that in our risotto. Straight into a blender. The thyme and the rosemary obviously will get removed. Same thing with the onion and the garlic. It can be a bit more tricky with the garlic, but if you're using a fork, you can get it out easily. And now the plan is to blend these into a puree, so you don't want to go too thin in terms of consistency. And I have here some vegetable stock from when we cook the risotto that will help bringing all this together, because at this point it's gonna be a bit too thick. So about 1 ladle goes in to begin with, and if we need more, we can add more. This is the consistency we're looking for. And now the risotto goes back on the heat, and we're gonna add about 1-2 ladles to begin with of the puree that we just made. Now this will be more than we need for this recipe, but that's absolutely fine, because we're gonna keep this in the fridge. We can keep it for a good few days, or you can freeze it and it will last a long time. And because we cooked our risotto to about 80% from where we want it to be, the 20% of cooking will happen now with the sauce. So now the risotto has the chance to absorb some of that butternut squash flavor. It will be just so much better than just mixing it and serve it right away. And we're gonna give it about 2-3 minutes of cooking, but this is the time when we're gonna taste for seasoning. And I think we could do with another teaspoon of salt. And my friends, this is our risotto right here. And I hope you enjoyed this simple recipe. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more simple recipes like this.